This tutorial will walk you through how to make a chair out of only cubes and the cube's attributes. First, let's take out a cube. We want to start with the central piece of the chair, which is the seat. So let's press T on our keyboard, which switches us to our scale tool, and then click and drag towards the center of the circle to make the entire cube smaller. Holding Shift after you have started moving will allow you to go by 10. Once at 40 centimeters in all dimensions, let's start shaping the cube. Click on the cube to show its attributes in the Attribute Manager. I will use various methods to make changes in the attributes just for demonstration purposes. Let's decrease the size in X to 35 centimeters by typing the number in, the size in Y to 3 by clicking and dragging on top of the little arrows, and the size in Z to 38 by using the little orange cubes to get an approximation and then typing the number in. Remember that Z is your blue axis, so that's the cube that you want to use. Get into the habit of rounding out your numbers so that you're not dealing with something like 4.97076 and instead typing in a whole 5. This makes lining things up with the grid or doubling and halving numbers a lot easier in the long run. Now that we have the seat done, let's make sure to name this cube so that we can differentiate it from the other objects and quickly select it if need may be. Naming is incredibly important and will be taken into account when your assignments are graded. Now we are going to make the support of the seat. Instead of taking out another cube and having to completely resize it from scratch, let's simply copy and paste our seat. To do this, select it in the Objects Manager and press Command C or Control C to copy and Command V or Control V to paste. This will give you seat point 1, which we will rename seat_support. Now let's alter the seat support by switching to your Move tool, E on your keyboard, and moving it down a bit to get a better view of what's happening. Let's move it down to -2 in Y. Just a note, you can type the position, size, and rotation changes in your coordinate manager and press apply, and this will then apply these changes to your object. Now let's resize the seat support to 32 centimeters in X, 35 centimeters in Z, and 5 centimeters in Y. As you can see, I am using all three techniques again just to show you that you can alter the size in multiple ways. Let's do a quick render preview to see how our cubes are lining up. To do this, press on this button up here or press Command R or Control R as the shortcut. Next, let's do the first leg of the chair. Take out a cube. And as you can see, because we were really zoomed in, our cube actually came out surrounding us. So let's zoom out and begin resizing this cube. The final size for this cube should be 3 centimeters in X, 3 in Z, and then let's make it shorter to 38 centimeters in Y so that we can get a nice length. Let's switch to the 4-panel view so that we can begin positioning this leg. From the top view, holding the green axis band, let's move this cube both in Z and X, but not in Y. Look at how this change is happening in the perspective view as I move it in the top view. I'm going to zoom in so that I can line this leg up better, and as you can see, from the end of our seat support to the end of our seat, there are 3 grid spaces. I am positioning this leg so that it covers the same space from both sides as well as interacts with the seat support. These tiny grid spaces in the current zoom distance we have are 0.5 centimeters each, so there is 1 centimeter from where the seat support ends to where we place our cube. This makes the coordinate of this leg to be -15.5 in X, -17 in Z. Just to give you a visual, this is 16, this is 16.5, and this is 17. This is -14.5, This is -15, and this is -15.5. You do not have to know the perfect calculations. This was based on visual reference and then just rounding out some numbers. While -15.5 still has a decimal, it is better on the grid than -15.6231 would be. Alright, and now let's position this underneath the seat. So let's bring it down in a Y to -18 centimeters. Take a look at how things are going. And it's looking good. Let's go up and name our cube r_front leg. So I need to explain a few things about why I named this right and why front. The reason for this is that when modeling in cinema, you want to consider the object to be in first person view, and therefore anything on the right of the object is the right, and anything in front of the object is the front. To better demonstrate this, let's take out a quick figure. You don't have to do this yourself, I'm just showing you. As you can see, if we were looking through the figure's eyes, our right hand will be in the position that our leg is currently at, and the leg is also in front of us. And that's all there is to that. Okay, so now let's make our front left leg. And instead of starting from scratch, we're going to use the same technique since our legs are going to be identical. So let's make a copy of our right leg. By selecting the right leg, Control C or Command C to copy, Control V or Command V to paste. Let's rename it right away to L_front leg, and let's position it. So make sure that you're in your move tool and that you're holding shift so that it goes by tens. Remember that to hold shift should happen after you start moving, not before. The same as our right leg, we are doing 2 grid spaces from the seat support, so we end up with +15.5. I'm going to make the change in the coordinate manager this time. A quick render preview to see how it's going and moving on. Now that we have both front legs set up, let's duplicate them and bring them backwards towards the back of the chair. You can select more than one object by holding shift and clicking on multiple objects. While we can do Control C and Control V, let me show you another neat trick for duplicating. If you hold Control, you notice that there's 2 little white cubes in your cursor. This is to let you know that anything moved with this cursor will be duplicated. So if we hold Control or Command with both front legs selected and click and drag with our Move tool, we get duplicates of our legs. And then we get to position them at the same time. Let's quickly rename them to R and L back legs and position them accordingly. I'm changing to my 4-panel view once again to be able to see the chair from the top, and 2 grid spaces, and rounding out my numbers. It is good to be in the habit of pressing Control or Command R constantly so that you can get the render preview of how your final piece will look. I personally tend to obsessively check my render preview, so get used to tutorials with this. Now that we have the bottom part, let's make the back support. To do this, let's extend the size of our back legs. I am selecting both so that the change happens in both at the same time, and I am increasing their size in Y to around 82 centimeters. Changing this means we need to reposition this in the Y-axis, so let's switch views and look at this from our right view to approximate. Moving it upwards to around 4 centimeters in position Y. Notice how being in the floor panel view is very helpful because we can see that in the front view, the legs do not line up until we reach the 4 centimeters in Y. So if I move it down, notice that there's that line that shows me that those are the front legs. So now when it's in 4 centimeters, we know that they're lined up. Okay, now let's make the back support. Instead of making another cube, let's copy our seat and rename it. Now let's rotate it. Press R to switch to the rotate tool and rotate 90 degrees in the P rotation, which is 90 degrees around the x-axis, which puts it at 90 degrees higher in Y. I know this is a little bit confusing, not to worry, as you practice it will get clearer. Now let's do a quick positioning of how this will go by bringing it back to touch the back rest. Something important to notice is that the object's axis of this specific cube is now different from our world's axis, which means that its Z position is now pointing up and down. So let's bring it back, and we're actually holding the object's Y axis to do this. To bring it up, we're actually holding its Z axis. We're only talking about the object's axis, not the world's axis. The world's axis remains the same. Now let's make it smaller in all 3 dimensions by using the little cubes. So I'm holding the little cube in Z, then in Y, then in X. Rounding out our numbers, we get 2 centimeters in Y, 30 in X, and 5 in Z. Now rounding out our coordinates, we are placing this in 17 centimeters in Z and bringing it up to 23 centimeters in Y. Note, the coordinates are still based on the world's axis, so changes in the Y and the coordinate are still up and down. Again, don't worry if this doesn't all make sense right away. Practice makes perfect. Now let's add another back support by using our trick from earlier. Hold, Control, or Command and move the low back support upwards to create a duplicate. This looks great. Let's not forget to name our duplicate of the back support. Now, as a final touch to the modeling, let's add some nice round edges to the cubes. Select them all by clicking and dragging to create a marquee. And you want to check on fillet and give it a fillet radius of 0.15 centimeters. Look at the difference this makes. No fillet, fillet. It's a pretty drastic improvement. Alright, we're now done with the chair model, so our last step is to give this some color. Let's make a material by double-clicking the material manager and make it brown by changing the color. Now let's place it on all of our different cubes. Once again, you can place a material by simply clicking and dropping it on top of the actual model or on the objects in the Object Manager. And this is our final piece. Looks good. Let's save this chair and render it out. You can go up to File, Save Project, or press the shortcut Control or Command S. Name it, and save it. Then let's go render to Picture Viewer. Save as, change the format to JPEG, name it, and save it. And we're done. Good job with your first tutorial. See you next time.